Gamshi Lakwan, which if you don't speak Yankala Kalapuya means what's up, folks? I'm Mark Harris. Welcome to DiversiTV. If we are in our 7th season here at Lane Community College, DiversiTV, in case you are new to our show, welcome. If you are part of our growing legion of devoted watchers, and I've also been seeing this saturation coverage that's been happening during spring break. Welcome back. DiversiTV, just to give you a taste of our mission is to illuminate everyday diversity issues and give the mic and the camera to those who don't always get it. And to that end, here at Lane Community College, we have diversity as part of our core mission and values, as many organizations do. And so, following that rough rubric of diversity, we basically start with what I call the Federal Five. That is, if you apply for financial aid or a job, then you have to declare yourself as one of the Federal Five ethnic minorities. So we focus on that, and since we're on Turtle Island, we nearly always start with a native perspective, one way or the other. Then because we speak English, we follow the convention of how English came to Turtle Island, and we have what we refer to as an Anglo perspective, though some people might take issue with that name. But okay, what do you people... And they have. Well, gee, what do you people want to be called anyway? All right. Pink, okay. And then we also then have an African American perspective, Asian American perspective, Latino, gay, lesbian, bisexual, transgender, transsexual, queer questioning, two-spirit perspective, youth, class, and then we round out with spirituality and religion, and on the 10th we also might have a lanyap show, if you're not familiar with that term from New Orleans, a little something extra.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
In terms of dealing with human relations, as our guest does on a daily basis, even though she may not deal with these particular things, we deal with often, Lane Community College, I train drug counselors. And so one of the things I have both my addictions counselors and my ethnic studies students look at is 6 types of isms. And basically an ism is an individual, social or structural mentality, that's the ISM, and then you apply it to the rubric. So classism, racism, addiction, ability, age, sexism, heterosexism. And so one of the things we also look at in terms of 6 types of isms from the literature is type 1, which is verbal and physical assault. This is usually what people think of as like hate crimes. They call you a name or they hit you or something like that. Verbal or physical assault. Type 2 is nonverbal microaggressions. So they may not call you a name, but they deny you service. And so otherwise, it's based on whatever your visible characteristics are. So isms are basically systems of pattern discrimination or oppression, if you will, based on your appearance or assumed characteristics as part of some kind of group, some visible, detectable human difference. So type 1 and type 2 are committed by individuals. And so these are basically defined in the literature that studies that. Type 3 is what I refer to as unconscious institutional. That is, the institution, because it employs individual, is unaware that people within it commit type 1 and type 2 and therefore does nothing about it. And so it's an organizational evolutionary stage, because bureaucracies make policy, and if they acknowledge that something is going on, then they make a policy for it. If there is no policy, then they don't acknowledge that it goes on. So it becomes another organizational strategy. Type 4 is conscious institutional discrimination, where the discrimination is in fact legal and the institution is organized to carry it out. So that could be Nazi Germany, apartheid South Africa, the Jim Crow South, the state of Oregon at its founding, and some say as it continues, certainly it has, when you are excluded, when you're basically founded on the principle of essentially excluding American citizens from another state in the United States because of their race, when your organizational DNA and every institution follows suit and continues to follow suit until you consciously remove and make policies against that. Type 5, conscious institutional, where the discrimination is actually illegal, but it continues because it's profitable. So this is like, for example, in the financial sector, redlining, but there are other types of discrimination where this happens, where if you are an applicant for an employment, and they've done testing with this, where two applicants show up with the exact same resume and they're dressed identically but they're different race, whose resume gets round filed, whose gets accepted, the whole front office look, what is the front office look, et cetera, et cetera. So those are legal patterns of discrimination, but they continue because they're profitable. And then type 6, sociostructural violence, which is actually more widespread, and in terms of the body count actually does quite a bit more damage than the other 5 combined in terms of the actual body count. And I'll just kind of go into that in a little detail because it's spelled out, and I want to do that for the benefit of the viewers who don't see my ethnic studies or addictions classes. So by Dr. Hussein Abdullahi Bulhan from his book Franz Fanon and the Psychology of Oppression, violence is any relation, process, or condition by which an individual or group violates the physical, social, and/or psychological integrity of another person or group. From this perspective, violence inhibits human growth, negates inherent potential, limits productive living, and causes death or disease, disproportionately usually. The proposed definition rests on several assumptions. First, violence is not simply an isolated physical act or a discrete random event. It is a relation, process, and condition undermining, exploiting, and curtailing the well-being of the victim. Second, these violations are not simply moral and ethical, but also physical, social, and/or psychological. They involve demonstrable assault on or injury of and damage to the victim. I prefer target to victim, but it works the same way, really. Third, violence in any of the 3 domains, physical, social, or psychological, has significant repercussions in the other 2 domains. Fourth, violence occurs not only between individuals, but also between groups and societies. Fifth, intention, and this is the critical part to understand about sociostructural violence. Intention is less critical than consequences in most forms of violence. Any relation, process, or condition imposed by someone that injures the health and well-being of others is by definition violent. With privilege systems, for example, then, the original intent or design of the system is less important than the effect or the consequence of the fact that the privilege system exists and access is not granted to all. And access could be also to safety, because one of the things I point out, for example, to my male students, here on campus, when we have night classes, guys do not feel, they are not threatened or even have any concern about being sexually assaulted walking to their car at night. The women don't have that same experience. Right. Okay? And so there is an invisible condition that is palpable that will basically lump under sociostructural violence that creates those conditions, where the city of Eugene at night is less safe than Tokyo.
Interesting. I didn't know that.
Well, women are not raped. They can walk at all hours in the streets of Tokyo. You can't necessarily say that in any American city.
Right.
So our guest tonight, Laura Elizabeth Sadhu. Explain what SPHR is again.
Oh, Senior Professional in Human Resources. So that's my hard-won certification.
Ah, okay. Kind of like a degree in human relations?
Kind of, yeah. Human resources, yeah.
Okay, human resources?
Yeah.
And you're currently at Woman's Space?
Yeah, I'm actually serve on their board, and but now I'm doing some temporary human resource work for them, just like helping them with their handbook and doing some training and stuff like that.
And you're president of the Lane County Human Resource Association. What does that entail? Who is that?
Lane County, it's a separate nonprofit entity. It's connected to the national organization, the Society for Human Resource Management, and we're a chapter, one of like 20 million, I don't know how many, throughout the whole world.
Okay.
Yeah, and so there's many chapters in Oregon, and we just happen to call ourselves the Lane County Human Resource chapter, just because we serve that population. So.
Well, welcome.
Well, thank you so much for asking me.
Sure. So where are you from?
Well, I was actually born in Berkeley, California, and lived there for the first 10 years of my life. And then my mom moved my brother and I up here to Eugene, where she was born and raised.
Okay. Okay. So you came to Eugene and were imported here, as it were.
Yeah. Yeah.
So how did you come to do the work that you do generally in human resources?
Well, that's I've probably been doing it for about 20 years, and I'm 51 now. And I did bits and pieces just because my ex-husband and I, we had our own business, and so you're always kind of doing human resource work with your employees, hiring, firing, whatever, different kind of stuff. And then I had my own restaurant in Salem. I lived in Salem for a while. And so then you're again doing this kind of human resource work. And then as I came back to Eugene and started working at a natural food store in town, I worked at a herbal extract company, and I just started doing this more regular HR work, and then got more training and my certification and that kind of thing.
So what does that certification, certify you to do? What is it?
Well, basically,
certify that you have or you've attained or whatever?
It kind of probably doesn't mean that much to anyone unless you're a human resource person.
Okay.
What it tells people, for let's say if I was recruiting for a human resource person, I needed a human resource person. If I see that somebody has that certification, it just says, oh, they have this body of knowledge. And the way I look at it too is I'm often networking with people anyway, because you never know everything about your profession.
Yeah.
So I might call somebody up and say, oh, have you ever had experience doing whatever, performance evaluations, whatever it is, So, yeah.
So you describe yourself as a change agent.
Yeah.
What's the job description for that?
Well, it's kind of like whatever I seem to get into. And the reason I kind of jokingly, told Dean that was my job description.
But you're serious.
Well,
I've seen you work.
Yeah, he knows. I am serious. And I think part of it is, as I've developed in my career, I seem to end up at different jobs where I just feel kind of called, and you could say maybe it came to me in my meditation or whatever, to do certain things. And it often seems to be about changing stuff within the organization. And what's ended up happening is at first it seems to be well received, but then I think what happens is people kind of go, oh, whoops, I may have to change something about myself. Or I may have to change something. I know it's shocking. I may have to change something, like try to look at the inner workings of the organization and make some bigger changes. And so what's ended up happening to me is I've either been laid off several times, job elimination. I've lost my job, I think, because of, I think I'm good at change. I like change. They seem to want the change, and then
they say they want the change.
They say they want the change, and then it seems to shift.
Oh no, that's too much change.
It's too much change. Most people, my philosophy is, most people don't really want to look inside. So that's a whole nother topic. But anyway.
Well, it might not. I mean,
okay, maybe.
Because the pieces, under the general rubric of like diversity training, whatever that is, so how that whole soliloquy we talked about with isms. So the reason I even had to get into that is like training the workforce of the alcohol and drug system in this state, where, first we had to do the piece of, one, most of the industry wasn't even pharmacologically competent.
Right.
They were ex-addicts or alcoholics
Right.
with no medical background, not understand. So you know, if you have a 20 or 30 long, you know, you're alcoholic, I mean, not in age, but how long they've been in recovery,
sure.
right? They don't know junkies. They don't know potheads.
Sure.
It's all just
It's
drugs
not-
to them.
Exactly.
And,
there
you know-
might be more attuned with the whole alcoholic
Right.
thing, but yeah.
Right. And
absolutely.
so, you know,
Yeah.
old line AA,
Yeah.
90 meetings in
Oh,
90
yeah.
days,
Oh,
and
yeah.
not really looking at
Yeah.
either the neuroscience, not looking at,
Right.
at any of the
Right.
pharmacology. I mean, that's where
Right.
we started.
Well, and
with
also in that situation, what's the bottom line? Why did they start using or drinking?
Right.
It's because they got stuff going on. So
Right.
you're trying to cover.
Well, and we weren't even getting into the whole self-medication aspect.
Well,
What
yeah.
are we medicating?
Yeah,
and
exactly.
What is the inner process that's going on?
That's a whole nother piece of another
So,
layer.
I mean,
yeah.
so what I was presenting in the beginning
Yeah,
of the broadcast was, okay, this is social service stuff, but we're finding applications in the workplace because, well, gee, okay, so you were in a restaurant.
Right.
And so, for example, the microaggressions piece that I talk about, that's classic because there was a lawsuit with it. That's why Denny's got diversity training because...
Often the way it works. Lawsuit, training.
Yeah, right.
yeah.
Because President Clinton's Secret Service detail was sitting down to Denny's, and so black agents and white agents, all in suits,
Yeah.
sitting next to each other,
Yeah.
right? White agents get served first. They get their menus and water.
yeah.
45 minutes go by. The black agents haven't even gotten water, napkins, or anything.
Yeah.
White agents pay their bill, and
Yeah.
they're going, hey, where's our guy's food?
Yeah.
Right? And so, boom, what's the reason?
Right.
They're all in business suits.
Yeah. Yeah.
They're all Secret Service.
Hello,
they're all,
what's the
hello,
difference?
what's
Yeah.
the difference?
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah.
So
I've actually had that happen to me at a restaurant, though, where people ignored me.
Mm-hmm.
You know.
So, right, you haven't been called the name or whatever. So what is it? They're having a bad day, or
You wonder.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, in
Yeah.
that situation, for me, it was when I used to wear a turban, and so that seemed to be challenging for some people.
Yeah.
You know.
And this is probably before the whole 9/11 thing.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Right.
A while ago. Yeah.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
one of our brothers and sisters in turban, so to speak.
Yeah.
Right. Had to. As a school teacher, had to fight that
Yeah,
discrimination.
I remember that. Yeah.
Suit because of the old law from the Ku Klux Klan about
Right.
wearing religious garb,
Right.
which is originally aimed at Catholics.
Oh,
So,
interesting. Okay.
yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
And there was a piece on NPR today about two Sikhs in the military. I think they're Indian Sikhs, but
Okay,
a
yeah.
doctor and a dentist. Like,
Yeah.
hey, we have a whole tradition in India of serving our country in the military for like multiple generations.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
Yeah, and wearing a turban and our uniform as part of our uniform.
Exactly.
What's up?
Yeah. Exactly. What's the problem?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean,
Anyway.
we're not in combat here. I'm a dentist.
Right. Right.
But,
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. So,
So-
in terms of like, okay, looking at what happens inside and getting people to look at that, because what's inside generates behavior.
Right.
I mean, when you're an employer, you have a hammer in one sense. Or a gentle, a fist inside the velvet glove.
Depending on where you work,
Yeah.
gentle or
Yeah.
a steel hammer or a foam hammer. Yeah.
But in your position or various positions, we don't have to really talk about the employers or
Yeah.
even your employment, in terms of specifics. But if you're a change agent and you're trying to basically, hey, whatever the mission of the company is, serving our customers or
Right,
whatever.
right.
Here's how we might best achieve that,
Right.
and you need to basically get on board with doing that.
Right. Well, I thought I was maybe suggesting it in a way like, here, this is a good idea, as opposed to, you have to do this. Part of what I've noticed seems to be a link at these different places is often a diversity piece. Because I think because I grew up in Berkeley and I grew up in that area and it was very natural for me. We just played in the neighborhood and it would be, black kids, Asian American kids, whatever, just in the neighborhood. It was the kids we played with. And so that seemed very normal to me. So I don't know if it was that or just somehow maybe how my parents taught me. I'm not exactly sure, but for me, I've always been very aware of injustice and just feeling like I want to do something if I can, you know. I think wearing a turban certainly made me more aware, even though I'm a white person or pink or whatever you want to call me, European American or whatever it is. You know, it's certainly wearing that turban made me real aware of being different, you know, and being in, like you said earlier, in a group. You know, I mean, I've had people yell at me, call me names, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
So I think just kind of out of my life experience, I got very passionate about diversity. And one of the things that really clicked for me is I used to work at the Oregon Department of Corrections, and I was the recruitment and diversity administrator there.
So you were recruiting the entire workforce.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I was in charge of that department.
Yeah, right,
you know, right.
right.
So that's like over 4,000 employees, right? So anyway, it was actually quite an interesting job, as you can imagine, working, you know, within that prison system and stuff. But one of the things that I kind of realized is that I think that they really wanted, on some level, they wanted the diversity piece, but I think in more ways they kind of just wanted to say, we have someone in charge of that. You know, so they could say, oh yeah, Elizabeth's taking care of that. Well, so what ended up happening is as I would do my work, and I just started by doing what to me seemed very minor little things to just get some awareness around diversity.
As an example.
An example. I would send out an email.
This is at the central office, so to
This is
speak.
the central office in Salem.
Right.
So as an example, I would send out emails monthly that were the State of Oregon sanctioned diversity events calendar.
Right. Right. I know that calendar.
Exactly.
State agency doing this, you know, from out of, I think it's not the government.
It's out of DHS.
Yeah, out of DHS,
Yeah.
right.
So it's like, okay,
Which
not a big
corrections
deal.
is part of.
Corrections is part of the state system.
Yeah.
So anyway, I would send that out, and I would get back hate mail. And I wouldn't say celebrate or anything like that. I'd just say, State of Oregon Diversity Events Calendar. So what really kind of started snowballing a little bit
Hate mail. Huh?
Was in June, which, as you may know, is GLBT or Gay and Lesbian Rights Month. Okay.
Right.
So I sent that out. I got back so much hate. You can call it hate mail. I don't know.
Yeah.
People commenting. And I actually had 2 grievances filed against me for sexual harassment and religious discrimination, which I was like, okay.
Sexual harassment, how is that?
Because they felt like, because I sent out this email saying June was Gay and Lesbian Pride Month, that somehow they had it in their head that was sexual harassment. Okay?
Were these sustained?
No. So then they had to do an investigation, you know. And so, you know, there were no findings, right? But out of that is I got people who kept sending me. I had some people who just kept sending me. Anytime I sent anything out. So then you're kind of thinking about, okay, how's this one going to be? You start like kind of worrying about it because it starts being like Pavlov's dog, you know. You start getting these emails. So anyway.
And you are simply forwarding a state-sanctioned email.
Yeah.
As part of your job description or as an FYI.
Yeah, exactly.
Period.
So, although then I decided to, and this is where I started thinking, maybe I'm an activist because I
sometimes pressing return is an activist.
Well, sometimes. And then, so then what would happen is I was also a part of the affirmative action. They have an affirmative action state-wide group that was kind of became like a support group for me, certainly. And we would get together every month, and there was a governor-appointed woman, Peggy Ross, who was in charge of that, and she's fabulous. But so what ended up happening is I would start joking and saying, "Oh, I'm going to my AA meeting," you know, and then I'd tell them, I said, "Oh yeah, here I am," and I say, "Hi, I'm Elizabeth. I'm addicted to diversity," and they'd all go, "Hi, Elizabeth," you know, like we were having. And so, you know, we kind of made it fun. But so I could go there.
Sometimes you got to because you go crazy.
Oh, yeah. So I could go there and kind of talk about the stuff I was dealing with, you know, and I wasn't feeling very much support from the organization or my boss at the time. And
Doing your job.
doing my job.
So, I mean, when the hate emails went through, not that it matters who your boss is, but what was the
Right.
response?
Well, kind of like, it was almost like, what are you doing? You know, who told you to do that, kind of thing. And now I was given no direction.
Who told you to do that? It's a logical function
Well,
with your job title.
That's what it seemed like to me. But anyway, because it was stirring up stuff again, you know, whoa, change agent, anyway. But so then it all kind of came to a head when, so we had these monthly affirmative action meetings, and one of the guys, he was the assistant to this woman, Peggy, and he was Native American. And so a little bit before Thanksgiving, he kind of talked a little bit about his belief system and his in his religion, and about Thanksgiving and how it was a time of mourning for his people. Mm-hmm. And so it just really made me think, you know, like, oh wow, that would be really an interesting topic, you know, to send out, just like something else to think about, right? Mm-hmm. And in my mind, I'm thinking, wow, that's just fascinating, you know. So anyway, I did, you know what's happening.
I know what's coming next.
So I did a little research, and I found some stuff on the internet, you know, that was kind of these different viewpoints of Thanksgiving.
Yeah.
So all I sent out was, I said, another viewpoint, and then put these different articles. Oh my gosh, I got just like this amazing flood of really, really a lot of negative email coming back to me. And now, because I had shared with Peggy and this man, Matthew, what I was going to do, they were calling me like, how are you doing? You know, because they knew. I think there's this innocence about me that I'm just thinking, oh, people will find this so interesting, you know?
Yes.
That's fine. So anyway, so they were really supportive, and Peggy, as you know, she's the director of this group and governor appointed, so she's calling the head of corrections and asking, what are you guys doing to support Elizabeth? And which was very cool. But in the meantime, my boss, who's not, she kind of still works there, but she's not the head person anymore, was asking me, why'd you tell the governor's office? You know, kind of thing. Like, well, I don't even know what you're talking about. Like, what do you mean, you know? Well, it turns out there's a guy named Lars Larson. Have you heard of him? Well, I had never heard of him. So
I won a phone battle with him.
Awesome. Well, he called me. So I'm sitting in my office, and I hear this guy, oh, this is Lars Larson, you know, with his radio voice. And I'm like, okay, hi, how are you? You know, I didn't know he was. And he's apparently, some of the people at corrections had forwarded my email to him.
Naturally.
Okay? So then he starts, I'd like to put you on my radio show. And so I'm kind of thinking, I'm not sure about that. And so I said to him, what's your mission statement? Thinking that I can kind of find out, you know? And, well, he never answered
Lars
me.
That's great.
Yeah. He never answered me. But as he
No,
kept
of course
like
not.
talking, blah, 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 you know, whatever. I hear you, blah, blah, blah. Then I realized, and I said, no, I'm sorry, I can't talk to you. And I hung up. Well, then later that afternoon.
That opened the flood.
Yeah, well, later that afternoon, I went over to the main office of the corrections, and people were teasing me. I was walking down the hall, and we're like, hey, Elizabeth, we hear you hung up on Lars Larson. Because apparently he'd already called. But I guess our public affairs wouldn't even talk to Lars Larson. So it was kind of funny. It was like, oh, well, you know. So it continued to snowball a little bit, and I was actually told to not communicate anymore, to not send out any more communications to anyone. So,
especially nothing from from DHS, you know, the usual.
Just nothing, you know.
Yeah.
So anyway, it created a stir, and I actually left about 7 or 8 months after that for kind of other reasons. And then I just keep rolling along, you know. But the nice thing about all that is I developed this really nice comradeship with these people. I had some very interesting interactions at Department of Corrections. I realized that I am an activist, that I kind of just won't shut up about some things. And so that was all good.
Yeah.
It was all good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know, some of the things that you went through are actually, certainly in retrospect, predictable.
Oh yeah,
Right?
sure.
And though you describe yourself as innocent, I know you ain't naive. So
Well, yeah,
you have, we have similar experiences. So I know you have an open third eye. But so you're willing, that whole Sikh tradition about being warriors for righteousness or whatever. However that
I
works.
could always relate to that. Yeah.
So the piece, in terms of having dealt with Lars Larson myself, because in the context, and this is how we are a state institution as well, and we're an educational institution, and I've gotten that calendar, and I've been in the position of being interim chief diversity officer for this institution. So one of the things that how I came up about Lars Larson, some racist skinheads. Usually when they come around, they come and leaflet around the time of Martin Luther King's birthday or some Black History Month or something. Yeah. Right? And they come, usually after hours. They never come when there's students here. So it's almost always after hours, and they poster the bulletin boards.
Oh, interesting.
Okay. With, Martin Luther King was a philandering communist, that kind of stuff during the, all right. Yeah. So here was the issue. Our policy is that bulletin boards are for student use only. Right. Okay? And you have to run them through the Student Resources Center for approval. And pretty much they'll approve anything, especially if you're a student club. Right. But these people are not. Right. Okay? I mean, because even though we have things like the Black Student Union, anybody can join because it's part of the college, and we don't discriminate, and nobody discriminates. Right. At one point, the Black Student Union had a Japanese student who was president of it. Cool. So if the skinheads wanted to start a white student union, they're welcome to go through the same process that every other student club goes to, including open membership. Right. Yeah. Right? Yeah. Because that's the way we roll as a state institution that's non-discriminatory. If they want to put posters on the bulletin boards, then they have to go through that approval process. So someone of them, because Lars kind of goes with that kind of, say, fairly ultra-right, conservative, even though, well, I'm not a racist, well, whatever. Okay? You're defending skinheads. Right? And basically the way he framed it is, why is Lane Community College impinging upon the free speech rights of students? Okay. Well, if they're students, where's their club? Right. If they're students, why can't they go through the same process that everybody else goes through to use the bulletin boards? It's open to students. They haven't come out as students. All they've given is one, their little Volksfront P.O. box in Springfield, and another one in Atlanta, Georgia. Okay, which if you go to the Stormfront, that Nazi organization, Stormfront, that clearly is not about, or MartinLutherKing.com, which is an anti-Martin Luther King website.
It is?
Yeah.
Oh, God.
Oh, yeah. Right.
Okay.
So, fine. Yeah. This is who you're supporting, the free speech. Okay, if they want to have free speech, then what they need to do is be responsible and go through the process like everybody else. So he kept coming back to, why is Lane Community College, it's not about that. We're not doing that, Lars. So look, a lie repeated does not make it truth. So
I think part of his tactics are to try to wear you down.
Well, and I just, keep up.
Yeah.
No, here's the truth. No, we're not. Yeah. And so basically, we'd break for commercial, and then he'd come back with the same one. I just answered that, but no, it's not. Just expand upon another point. And he hung up.
Oh, right on.
So, and then I got calls saying, hey, you beat Lars Larson. How'd you
Apparently he did talk about me the next day on the radio. Yeah. Not that I got interviewed, but.
So the change agent piece, you know,
Yeah,
I mean, so,
yeah.
you know, even when you're doing fairly innocuous things, even though it's state-sponsored,
Yeah.
well, sexual harassment because you know, a calendar that's GLBT month, June,
yeah.
well, no,
Yeah.
you're not sexually harassing. Oh, you're
Right.
anti-Christian. No, it's not even about that.
Right.
Oh, well, the Thanksgiving thing. Well, you know,
Yeah.
that is their framework, and if you actually study the historical facts about Thanksgiving, it ain't pretty.
Yeah,
Sorry.
yeah.
It ain't
People
pretty.
don't want to look at it.
So, you know,
Yeah,
right.
Yeah. Well, and I even had another, organization not that long ago tell me that I talked about feminism and diversity too much. Mm-hmm. And
By mentioning it once?
well, I never talked about white privilege.
Yeah.
And they told me coming into the job that, oh, it's, very white male dominated, good old boy network, but this is really great. You'll be our diversity expert,
Okay. And so when you even suggest a mild change, what is their reaction?
They thought I just harped on it too much.
By mentioning it once?
Well, I probably talked a couple times about, well, there's this training opportunity, how about this, and I think the fact that you just bring it up a few times with people, with some people, it seems like then you're talking about it too much or a lot.
Yes.
Yeah.
A few, literally 2 or 3 times.
Well, I don't know.
That's
I
been
don't know
my
if I can.
experience.
Yeah. I don't know. I don't know if I can remember exactly. I was there a year, so I'm sure I talked about it more than a few times. But
Sure.
yeah. But it was like they brought it up to me as this is a topic we want you to deal with.
Okay.
Yeah.
And so you're trying, this is
So I'm trying to
ostensibly
deal, yeah.
what you hired me to do, and I'm being a good faith employee.
One of the bases. And as a human resource person, of course, you're looking at, like you talked earlier, you're looking at recruiting,
Mm-hmm.
being fair in recruiting, trying to be inclusive. You're looking at, recruiting in a wide area so that you can bring more diversity into your organization.
That is assuming they want it, for real.
They didn't want
They
it.
didn't.
Nope.
Okay.
Nope.
Right.
They wanted to replicate what they had.
Which, given, without mentioning, the history or
Right.
whatever,
Yeah.
but knowing some of the players, that's actually not surprising.
No.
So, I mean, for example, with corrections.
Yeah.
So, I mean, you did talk about you wanted to talk, you were okay with talking about that because
Yeah,
that was
yeah.
public record.
Yeah.
Which, all right, so corrections ain't necessarily being correct and doesn't have a history of being correct.
Yeah.
Especially with diversity, particularly with our friend Linda Hamilton, or other they seem to have issues with women, whether it's women of color or women trying to do their job. Right?
Well, yeah, I guess. I was there for about a year and a half, so I wasn't there for a very long time. I was there long enough to kind of get a feel for the place. I think in some ways it was a very interesting job. There were a lot of interesting challenges. One of the things that was suggested to me was that, what about if we try to replicate the prison population in the staff,
Yes.
Yeah, what a
Okay.
concept.
What a concept.
Yeah, so it was interesting in the sense that I think that I kind of
And
realized,
why were you? I already
Yeah.
understand why you're trying to do that, but let's
Yeah.
articulate it so people can see that on Front Street.
Okay. Well, so you can serve who are your clients in essence?
Yes.
Your clients are the prisoners.
Right.
Right. So if you want to really do rehabilitation and you want to be effective, then you need to understand your client base, right?
Yes.
And so to me, that made sense, like, okay, here, if you have, 20% African Americans and you have 20% Asian Americans and 20% Native Americans, then how about if you have and of course you don't call them prison guards anymore, you call them correctional officers.
Mm-hmm.
So then why wouldn't you have 20% of your officers be African American and, that kind of thing?
Mm-hmm. Especially if the availability in your local hiring area justifies doing that. And
Yeah.
you're underutilized for your local hiring area.
Well, there's that.
Well, you mean there is that, like, as in compliance with the law?
Well, yeah. Now, I'm not sure if they're out of compliance, because if you look, I don't think they were necessarily out of compliance, because I have to, say that. Because if you look at your local people in terms of hiring and replicating your local population, I don't think that's a problem. I mean, Oregon's a pretty white state.
Well, okay. So
I mean, that's maybe another topic,
well, it's actually a related one. So
okay.
You know, because,
but there's not a law that says you have to replicate your client base. So let's say your prisoners.
That's true.
You know what I
Right.
mean?
That's
but
true.
I think it was a good idea.
Yeah.
So
I mean, it had the virtue of never having been tried, and so you're not suggesting populating your prison, your correction officer population with ex-felons. That's not what you were suggesting.
No.
You were suggesting a demographic match, or one that more closely matched your population, so that from a safety standpoint, because that's what's an issue, you can begin to, when you're talking about serving your client base and their prisoners, it's not necessarily making prison nicer for them, but it's actually going towards the goal of, if they're going to be released to society, having some kind of role modeling possibly, so that could go on, right?
Yeah, your whole rehabilitation. I mean, the fact of the matter is, one of the reasons why you and I kind of get each other is not because you're a man and you're African American and I'm a woman and I'm white. It's because we used to be Sikhs at the same time. So we have that connection.
Yeah.
But not very many people get that piece of my life.
Yeah.
Which I know you get that. And so that's why, when you try to replicate, maybe to do that within the prison system, I mean, to me it makes complete sense, you know.
I mean, you weren't having the prisoners get up to do sadhana, for example, which actually wouldn't be, implementing
some of them might have been, but
yeah. I mean, there have been prison ashram projects and attempts to, bring meditation and yoga into the correctional system. Certainly, our friend Krishna in LA does that with yoga for youth, with incarcerated youth, and getting good results doing that.
Oh yeah,
by the way. But
and
attempts to bring that here locally have not necessarily met with success. But we shall see.
Yeah.
But getting back to the whole affirmative action piece as an example, just to illuminate that.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So Lane Community College is a state institution. Right. So our local area is defined differently depending on the employee group. All right? So for classified staff, local is, Eugene, Springfield, and or Oregon by extension, depending on what it is.
Right.
If it's faculty, management, or administrators, the local area is national.
I believe it. Because you're going to, and if you look at it in terms of recruiting.
Right.
Yeah.
It is national.
Yeah.
That's our local area.
Yeah.
So then, when we get to the question of, for example, 200, so the local hiring area is national, does Lane Community College represent the nation in terms of its faculty? No.
I wouldn't think so, but
No.
of course I don't know for sure.
Well, I know for sure.
I was going to say, I'll let you answer
I know
that
for
question.
sure. So, I mean, it's a rhetorical question, but it works like this. So,
Yeah.
if there's 250 full-time faculty,
Right.
and higher education faculty as a whole is 10% African American, then there should be 25 black faculty here if the recruiting.
How many are there?
There have never been more than 6. Ever. Lane Community College has never hired more than 40 African Americans in its entire history. Less than one a year.
Yeah.
So I know in my hire, in 1992, 93 roughly, there were 44 faculty positions open, 1,600 applications for them.
Oh my God.
Okay?
Yeah.
160 of those were minority. 11%. Okay, so representative.
That fits, yeah.
So you would expect, if normal distribution, random,
You would at least get 10% or
4% or
something.
right.
Yeah.
At least 4 hires, right? Out of that, they hired me.
Wow.
So either I'm really good,
It's good to hold on to that thought.
Well, I mean, but
no, but I hear you.
Let's play that out, okay?
Yeah.
So you're saying that one minority out of 160 was
know.
qualified to be hired? That's like stretching it.
No, that's
so the
totally,
statistical analysis of the federal standard for detecting discrimination is 2 standard deviations. That's 3.
Yeah.
So discrimination is definitely happening.
Yeah.
Okay, and so if you could have, the recruitment goal could be up to 10% African Americans just for faculty positions alone, and you've never had more than 6.
Yeah. You're not doing it right.
Something is not happening.
Yeah.
Right? So, state
hear
institution to state institution.
Oh, yeah.
So it's like.
Well, and what I found, at least, and I've worked in a couple state agencies, there often seems to be a lot of moving your way up the ladder. Mm-hmm. And, in some cases, of course, it makes complete sense because you really get the whatever agency, right?
Sure.
But you're always going to keep replicating what you have.
Yeah.
Because you keep moving the same group of people up the ladder.
And where often that becomes problematic, certainly in terms of, if you have a shifting population demographic of who you're serving, and you're basically dealing with the same people that were not serving even your regular white folks very well.
Yeah.
And you keep recycling those folks to preserve a job, and now
or
your demographic.
shuffle them around.
Yeah,
a lot.
or shuffle them around. Peter Principle to their highest set of incompetencies.
Yeah.
That doesn't work. So, with some of your work as a change agent has been with Lee Manoir and Stir Fry, where you sponsored a couple of trainings here and there. Tell me about that work.
I guess the first encounter I had with Le Manoir was seeing his film The Color of Fear, which was very impactful for me, very intense, emotional, and very inspiring also. So I had an opportunity then to go to a kind of a half-day training of his several years ago, and then I was involved in a local all-day conference called Work Trends, and I suggested as a keynote speaker, how about we bring Le Manoir? I think it would be very inspiring. He's a great speaker. He'll get people thinking. And so they agreed. Somehow they agreed. And he came, and it was a lot of people loved him, and a lot of people didn't love him.
Yeah, right. He does inspire that reaction.
He does that. So, but that's cool. And so then he and I connected at that time, and then we even had a follow-up conference call and said, hey, how about if we bring you back for an all day? And so that was last year, brought him here, and actually did a joint effort here with Lane Community College, and your Dennis Carr, your head of your HR department. And so we did an all-day thing here, and then recently put on another kind of a 3-day event where we had him, he spoke at my Lane County HR group, and then we watched one of his movies, The Last Chance for Eden, had a community discussion, and then did an all-day training. And he's very fabulous to work with. He's very inspiring, thought-provoking. You kind of never know what's going to happen, and always makes you really think. And I love it because I always learn something new about myself, which I like. I'm kind of liken myself to an onion. I'm always peeling the layers.
Crying? No.
And sometimes crying. That's right. Yeah.
So what do you think often is key in terms of, one of the things that we look at here at Lane as an employer, certainly diversity is willing to show up and apply, doesn't always get hired, but when it does get hired, it's almost as if, and this is definitely true, especially if you send out a state-sponsored email and you get sexual harassment and religious harassment.
Religious discrimination.
Okay, I'm being discriminated as a Christian. Okay, well, all right, but how real is that?
I always just kind of thought, if you see I send an email, why don't you just delete it?
Yeah. But that's one thing, but it's not you that's endorsing it, you're just passing on the information.
Just passing along information.
But in terms of looking at retaining what diversity comes here, that might be challenging.
It's hard. Well, I think part of it is here we are. If we're living here in, a white-dominated culture, basically, and I'm sure you know this as an African American man living here. If you, let's say, just something simple, but maybe not simple to you. Let's say hair products. I mean, I actually know a woman who used to work, you may be like, okay, where do I get my special hair stuff?
Oh, I know where I get it, and it ain't here.
Okay. Well, I have a friend who lived in Ontario, Oregon. She African-American. She worked for the community college there. She would go to Portland, all the way across the state to get her hair cut.
Right.
Well, okay, so she got a job.
That's what I say to my students, okay?
Yeah.
Part of the reason for locking up, okay,
Sure.
was the fact that there were 5 places in the state that I could get my hair done,
Yeah.
and 3 of them were in Portland.
Exactly. Yeah. And so if let's say I'm a company and I'm recruiting and I'm trying to recruit diverse applicants, well, that's just the tiny little beginning of it, really. This next part of it is, what are you going to offer them in your community? What are you going to offer in terms of, maybe there's different facial products, maybe there's different food products, maybe there's different hair, maybe, whatever it is. What about a sense of maybe cultural stuff, maybe a sense of family or something, There's so many pieces to it. And I just think people think, oh, I followed my affirmative action plan because I've now, posted this in different places where I at least have some diverse applicants. I don't think they think about any of that other stuff because people aren't looking outside themselves.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. And, I guess part of the piece is, if you're going to be here, and you understand, well, at least for African Americans, how many of us structure reality is we look at the history of a place.
Sure.
And if we know we're going to be moving into a place that was like kind of hostile, then you need to be self-sufficient. And you learn to be self-sufficient so that, you go to the places, you get your cultural hit, and you come back and you're fighting the good fight again.
Right.
Oh,
You're always in it.
But to be here, you have to be, kind of like, it's like being a raisin in a sea of buttermilk, where you basically have to have your shield, because the buttermilk's always trying to make you sour. You got to retain your flavor and your strength and your resiliency. That's just a reality of that in terms of the retention piece. So one of the things about changing the workplace is like, okay, how does the workplace change for the better in terms of accomplishing its essential mission? Because one of the pieces, like, for example, we deal with juvenile corrections, is looking at, look, it doesn't really matter that you can't recruit minorities to deal with your minority population. As a minority worker, I don't have the option of being culturally incompetent with white people.
Yeah,
ever.
That's true.
Okay?
Yeah.
So if we're talking about like middle-class black folks and their kids in corrections, however rare that happens, then you need to be able to understand how to deal with them, because there's books on the subject and there's training on the subject, and that's what you need to do, especially if you have the phenomenon which happened here, which basically impinges upon your corrections, where you have like a black kid, single black kid, car full of white kids smoking pot, gets busted by Eugene Police Department, not his car, not his pot. All the white kids get treatment, he gets jail.
Oh, God.
Right? And then gets no drug treatment by the Department of Youth Services. Multiply that out. Then the first drug treatment that he gets, because then he goes through that system and then falls into the adult system.
Right.
Still no treatment in corrections, even though it's addictions-related beefs.
Yeah.
First treatment services he gets is he comes to see me, and I met him as that student in high school.
Wow.
No treatment in between there.
Wow.
All right, so wait, the arrest was for pot. Why didn't you give him treatment when he was in high school?
Yeah.
Simple.
Yeah.
Right? It's a big, hey, you're white,
that
diagnostic
probably
criteria,
happened-
just apply it.
Yeah, and that
Simple.
probably happened not that long ago.
Yeah.
Well,
80s
people-
to 90s,
I've
it's
had-
still going on, really.
Oh, yeah. And I've had people say to me, in fact, they said it to me at corrections. I was in a meeting and it was like, oh, I thought all that stuff got settled back in the 60s.
No, it didn't. It's still
just like,
it's still
what?
going on. So
Yeah,
the
yeah.
diversity training
Yeah.
piece is simply do what your job description is, apply the most current up-to-date criteria, not what you learned in the 50s.
Right. Yeah.
Okay?
Yeah. Or what you never learned.
Or that you
or you
never
didn't
learned.
learn.
you
Yeah,
know?
yeah.
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 Any final thoughts?
Well, it's been really interesting talking. I assume we're getting low on time, and it went really fast. It went faster than I expected.
An hour is nothing
Yeah,
on television.
yeah. Well, and it's a big topic. There's a lot to talk about, and I really enjoyed talking to you. I don't know. I don't have any profound thoughts to end with. But
All right.
I should have prepared, I suppose.
No. I think basically some of the takeaway message is, okay, that change is difficult, but the change doesn't have to be as difficult as people are making it.
Yeah.
It could be as simple as knowing that there's a different point of view.
Yeah.
Where, read the little diversity calendar, or, understand why the
Yeah.
Native Americans might think that, Thanksgiving is a time for mourning, not time for giving thanks for them.
Well, and one of the things I've thought for a while is there's the saying, love thy neighbor as thyself.
Yeah.
And the problem is people don't really love themselves.
Very true. If you like what you've seen, send us an email at liveclass@lanecc.edu. I want to thank our guest, Elizabeth Sadhu, for coming in.
Thank you.
Send us feedback, put DiversiTV in the subject line, and suggest future shows, and tell us what you thought about this and any other shows that you've seen or will see in the future. Until then, go well, stay well.